Translate to number 9. People often ask me if Spanish is harder or easier than Italian. I tell them some aspects of Spanish are easier than Italian and vice versa, so really both languages are more or less the same in terms of difficulty. We start off with a kind of a change in the word order because in Spanish you would throw this word way up front often. And the way they say that is frequently, frecuentemente. And then the word for people is la gente, so frequently the people. The verb to ask is, well, there are two verbs to ask, but in this case, the correct one is preguntar. And in a future lesson, we'll explain why that is. And ask me would be me pregunta. We've kept this singular because we're referring to la gente, which is a singular word in Spanish. Now for if Spanish, it would be si el español. They say if the Spanish. Is harder would be, let's just highlight this, es más difícil. Or easier would be o más fácil than Italian would be que italiano. See how useful that word is there, que. So we have frecuentemente la gente me pregunta si el español es más difícil o más fácil que italiano. Also here it's good to notice how we're saying more difficult or easier, harder or easier, más difícil or más fácil. Now I tell them, this is I tell to them, and again we're still referring to la gente, a single, so it would be le digo. And then in English it's implied that, so we throw in que. I tell them that, le digo que. Some aspects of Spanish. Let's do all of this. The word for some here would be algunos. And we're making it plural because we're saying some aspects, aspectos. You can see how algunos aspectos in plural. Then of Spanish would be of the Spanish. Del, because we have this contracted. So this is how it would look. Le digo que algunos aspectos de él, and it gets contracted to del español. Then we have are, this is going to be son. Then easier, we came across it here, más fácil. But because we're talking about, again, plural, some aspects, this easier now would match and become fáciles. So we have fácil, right, that's singular, and then fáciles for plural. And actually we should have an accent over the A. Then again, we have this than, which we use que, and italiano, we just add an O there. And vice versa is very cool. It would be E, and then everything stays the same, just contract it like this, and they pronounce it viceversa, viceversa. Now the word for so, you can use what we normally do, así que, or there's another way you could say entonces. That's also used for so. So now we have two words for so and two words for about. So for so would be así que or entonces. The way they would say really is in reality, en realidad. Then both languages, they would express this as las dos lenguas. Literally the two tongues. A language is una lengua. So both languages, las dos lenguas. are more or less. This would be son, then más o menos for more or less. That's nice and easy. Son más o menos. For the same, well, the word for the same is igual, but again, we're referring to las dos lenguas, which is plural. So again, Spanish wants to match, and it will express it as iguales. You see how careful we have to be with matching things in Spanish, whether it's feminine or masculine, single or plural. Then finally, we have in terms of difficulty. So let's take all this at once. This would be en términos, so it's close to English. You have an accent over the E. En términos, in terms, and then of difficulty would be de for of, and then dificultad. Dificultad. Let's read through and check it now. Frecuentemente la gente me pregunta si el español es más difícil o más fácil que italiano. Le digo que algunos aspectos del español son, they should be más fáciles, or easier, que italiano, y viceversa. Entonces, en realidad, las dos lenguas son más o menos iguales en términos de dificultad.